Welcome back, everybody. You are listening to The Introverted Nerd Watches, where you get the nerdy black girl opinion on all the best and worst TV. I'm your host, Reese, and oh my God. Today I watched Season 3, Episode 13 of Saved by the Bell, Running Zack. And what in the ever-loving fuck with this episode? God damn, this episode is offensive. So before we get into any of that, you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and leave me a 5-star review. I'll read it on the next episode. I really deserve it for watching this episode. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Stitcher and Google Play. I'm also available on iHeartRadio. So get that app on your phone and listen to me everywhere you go. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at TINerdPod. On Instagram, I'm at TheIntrovertedNerd, and like the Facebook page at facebook.com/TheIntrovertedNerd. And if you want to send feedback, send it to TheIntrovertedNerd@gmail.com. So let's get into this episode. Running Zack. Okay. So let's talk about, first of all, what I remember about this episode before I watched it. Because the only thing I remembered was that Zack thought that he was part Native American. And that I remembered Jessie's family owning, Jessie's ancestors owning slaves, and that Lisa's ancestors were slaves. So that's what I remembered about this episode. This must not have been one of the episodes that came on a lot because, oh my God, I was tweeting about it because I try not to tweet about these episodes too much because I want to say everything that I have to say on the podcast. But I was just so fucking like, what? Like everything about everything. I was like, what the hell is happening here? Who thought this was a good idea? In just about every scene. I can't think of a scene where I was like, this seems about right. Okay, I don't even know what to even say about it. Let's get into the episode. So this all starts with Ms. Wentworth. It gave out an assignment. I guess she's a social studies teacher or something. I don't know what this class is. But Ms. Wentworth gives out an assignment for the kids to do a 3-minute presentation about their ancestors, about their family tree. And Zack, of course, is not taking this seriously. And turns out Zack, Lisa, Slater, and Jessie are all on the track team. And in order for Zack to compete in this big track meet, he has to complete this project. And he does his usual Zack thing to try to get out of it, but he has to do it. So, okay, first with the track thing. Zack is a distance runner. He runs the mile. Now, I know somebody's going to tell me that at their school, distance runners were like the jocks. They were right up there with the football players. Some asshole is going to tell me that. I don't care. Who gives a fuck about distance runners? I'm sorry, distance runners. I'm sorry. I don't want to offend you, but I mean, it's only during the Olympics that people give a shit about that. And even then, it's like people just, you flick through. I am an Olympics watcher. I love the Olympics, especially the Summer Olympics. I don't give a shit about the distance runners. It's all about the speedy shit. It's all about the, 100, 200 meters and the relays and shit like that. Nobody is watching the mile. Zack is like competing in like the mile. He runs the mile. I don't know. Is that even is that a distance? How long? Like, I don't know. Whatever. He runs distance, and they keep making reference to like him being fast, but I'm like, are distance runners that fast? Isn't it about running the longest? Isn't it about preserving your energy until you can get into like the last sprint? Oh, this offended me. This offended me too, because I was like, nobody gives a fuck about distance runners. And how is Slater on the track team? Slater has the body of like a wrestler or a football player. He's not running track. Get the fuck out of here with that. Ugh. And I'm like, okay, they have all these kids standing around. You could have made one of them or a few of them, track team members, instead of putting Jessie, Slater, and Lisa on the team. Like, Lisa is, Lisa's a cheerleader, and it looks stupid to have Kelly out there. To have Kelly out there being a cheerleader by herself, it is stupid. And Jessie, this is another activity for Jessie. Student body president. She's the occasional cheerleader. She just has a ton of shit going on. Like, how does she have time for this? How do any of them have time for this? Whatever. This is not. I'm getting worked up about this. This is not even the most offensive part. So when they're sitting in the max after this track meet or practice, whatever the fuck they're doing, they start talking about the presentation and how they all need to, get a good grade on this. And specifically, Zack needs to get a good grade on this because they need him to win this track meet against Valley. So, Zack is being his usual self. And Lisa starts telling the group about her ancestor, Abraham Turtle. And she was telling them how her ancestor helped slaves escape on the Underground Railroad. Or he escaped on the Underground Railroad, and then he went back and helped others escape. So, and everybody's like, oh, Lisa, your great-great-grandfather is so brave. And I'm like, that's nice. That's cool. Then Slater has to jump in because he can't stand not to have attention on him or something. Because my dude says, my great-great-grandfather was brave too. He was a bullfighter. And I was like, what? No, Slater. No. You do not do that after Lisa talks about her ancestor who was a former slave helping other slaves escape. You do not interrupt that with, well, my ancestor was brave too. He played a sport. He did a sport that was fucking dangerous. No. Who wrote this? Who decided this was okay? This was ridiculous. So I'm like, it's so crazy. And I'm like, how stupid was I as a kid that I thought that this was okay? Because it's so crazy to have he busts in with, my grandfather was brave too. And it's like, and Jessie calls him out on it. She's like, it would only be brave if the bulls had weapons too. So I'm like, that's not, she's mad about the whole like animal cruelty thing. And I'm like, okay, that's important too, but shut the fuck up for a second, Jessie. We're talking, right? Like, let the grown folks talk real quick, because what? And everybody else is like around nodding their head. And I'm like, Lisa, say something. Tell him that, it's not the same thing, that your grandfather deciding to fight a goddamn bull with like stupidly deciding to fight a bull is not the same as my grandfather being a goddamn slave. whatever. Let's keep going because I have some more. So Zack is doing the absolute minimum, and he's at home looking through a chest with Screech. Big mistake there. And he finds a picture of an Indian. Is this before, like, we were being, calling Native Americans, or calling indigenous people Native Americans? We were just, Indian was thrown all around this episode. I'm sorry. I don't want to, I'm not trying to be offensive to anybody, but that Indian was just all over the place. Zack was just being, oh my God, it was so offensive. That's what this episode is going to be called. Oh my God, this is so offensive. So he finds a random picture of a Native American, and he looks at it and he decides out of nowhere that he's related to this guy, because he's like, well, my mom used to tell me stories about how we had these distant Indian relatives. And I'm like, really? This is such a white people thing. I'm sorry, white people. I'm not trying to offend you. You'll survive this right here. So white people love telling you about their ancestry. They really love identifying with it, even if they don't know shit about it. Zack doesn't know anything about his native ancestor, who he doesn't even know if this person that he found a picture of is his native ancestor. It's just a picture that was in a chest that he found, and he connected it to some stories that his mother used to tell him. And I'm like, really? You don't find pictures of your, white ancestors, and you don't ask your parents about that? You find, okay, whatever. So he decides that he's going to take Screech to school. He's going to put the absolute minimum into this presentation. So he goes to school the next day, and Lisa's the first one up. She does her presentation about her great-great-grandfather, or however many greats it is, Abraham Turtle. And she tells about how he helped slaves get free on the Underground Railroad. And then she ends her presentation by saying, my family likes to call the Underground Railroad the original Soul Train. No. N-O, Lisa Turtle. No, it is not. And I believe she's the only black person in class. So making jokes about the Underground Railroad in front of a bunch of white people that probably don't know shit about the Underground Railroad is, it's not good. Oh my God. So, who's up next? I believe it's Jessie. Who doesn't matter. Jessie goes next. And Jessie has been trying to hide who her ancestors are, because they asked her about it earlier at the Max, and she just sort of, she like kind of brushes it off. She tries to move quickly past the topic. So she gets up in front of the class and she starts talking really fast. She's like, my ancestors used to ship food, water, people, and coffee. And she goes like through it really fast, and she tries to sit down before anybody can say anything. But Miss Wentworth is like, Jessie, can you do an actual fucking presentation here? And Jessie just goes off. She goes, I'm so sorry. My ancestors were slave owners. They were slave owners. And then she turns to Lisa, the only black person in class, and she's like, Lisa, I'm sorry. I'll do anything I can to make up for this. Can you ever forgive me? And Lisa is looking around like, what the fuck is this bitch doing? Like, stop it, Jessie. You're embarrassing me. like this is you're not helping me doing this. And finally Ms. Wentworth lets Jessie do all this shit, but then she finally like gets a fucking brain cell and she's like, Jessie, have a seat. Calm yourself down and have a seat. Because it's so that is my nightmare for, I mean, I don't want anybody to be acknowledged like that in front of the class, to be the only person, to be the only black person in a place. I don't know. I know black people you've been there. You like, if you're a black person, you've probably been in this situation where you're the only black person, or person of color is probably, we've probably all been in that situation where you're the only person of color in a situation, and to be identified, to be singled out is like, oh my God. And for me, like being an introvert and being like, it's so difficult to get me out into a crowd. If something like that happened, I would have dropped out of school. If it would happen to Lisa happened to me in high school, I would have walked out and never showed my face back at school. It would just be so terrible. And to have that happen, one of your best friends do that to you, it would have been, Jessie sucks. Jessie and Zack suck. That happens a lot. Like Jessie and Zack, they're both terrible people. Zack is worse, but Jessie is like just a notch below him, a few notches below, because Jessie tries to actually do the right thing sometimes. Zack never tries to do the right thing, or very rarely tries to do the right thing. So yeah, I'm going to give Jessie just, Zack's on top, but Jessie's like a few notches below. And in this episode, she was basically even with him, because she was just out of her fucking mind in this episode. She was crazy. So Zack gets up and does his presentation. He brings Screech up to the front with him. He makes Screech cross his arms like he's some sort of Native American like statue. He puts lipstick on his face like it's war paint. And then he proceeds to do just a really like nothing presentation. He doesn't know which native tribe his ancestor belonged to. So of course he said Cherokee, because that's what Cherokee is the only tribe that people know. That if somebody knows who their actual Native American ancestors are, by which tribe they say, because you hear somebody say, well, I actually have Native American ancestors, and most of the time you will get Cherokee. 99% of the time you will get Cherokee, which means that person probably doesn't have any Native American ancestors. So yeah, that's how you can tell. So he says Cherokee, and Miss Wentworth, to her credit, is like not buying into the Zack bullshit, and Zack tries to like pass this off and he has, oh my God, he has Screech speaking in this broken English. Why? Why? So yeah, and he also gives Screech like this toy tomahawk. Oh my God. So Screech is like being offensive too, like on Zack's command. He's chopping up, apples on Ms. Wentworth's desk with the tomahawk, and he's speaking in broken English, and I'm like, what the fuck is even going on here? So Ms. Wentworth sends the class out. The class is over, the bell rings, and she stops Zack from leaving, and she's like, you know what, Zack? That wasn't shit. You were being offensive to the class and to your ancestor. And And then Zack has the nerve. He gets like an attitude and he pulls the picture of the Native American out of his pocket. And he's like, well, sorry, this is the only thing I could find was this picture of, was this picture of my Native American ancestor. And I'm like, dude, take it down a notch, first of all. Second of all, what the fuck are you getting an attitude for? You could have done research, Zack. Nobody stopped you. We find out later in the episode that he had over a month to do research for this project. So it's not like this was, like put on him at the last minute. He had a ton of time to do this. He's just being, Zack, and he didn't do it. So Ms. Wentworth, bending over backward once again, like everybody else does, giving Zack another chance. She's like, you know what? I have a friend who's a Native American, and he can give you information. He can probably help you out with your project. I'm giving you another chance to do your presentation. Miss Wentworth's friend is Chief Henry. And Chief Henry lives in a garage. Chief Henry is the garage living Native American guy who Zack is just, Zack doesn't know anything but offensive Native American stereotypes. So he goes to Chief Henry's garage and garage apartment. And the first thing he says, one of the first things he says to him is, why aren't you wearing a headdress? Because Chief Henry has on, I believe it's like a Dodgers hat or something. The blue hat with I think that's Dodgers. I don't know anything about, sporty things, but I'm going to say Dodgers. So he's like, no, he doesn't say, why are you wearing the headdress? He just says, why are you wearing that hat? And he's like, because I couldn't find a Raiders helmet or something like that. And then Zack walks over to his, Zack is just walking. He's really familiar. Like, who walks around somebody's, this is a garage, so I understand being like kind of confused, but who gets invited to somebody's place, or who goes to somebody's place, wherever they live, and just starts touching stuff, like starts picking stuff up? Because Zack starts picking, he picks up like this beaded headband off of Chief Henry's desk, and he goes, did you learn how to bead on the reservation? And Chief Henry is like, no, dude, I learned it at UCLA. I'm like, what the fuck, Zack? He obviously doesn't live on a reservation right now. He lives in a goddamn garage, but who does that? Where they do that at? Like, where do you ask those kind of questions? And the fact that Chief Henry is not like, you know what, take your white ass out of here with your stupid picture and your blonde hair. You're probably not even fucking related to this Native American guy. Like, get the fuck out. I would have been perfectly fine if Chief Henry did that. But he just sort of laughs off Zack's ignorance and just, tries to help him out. And then Zack has a nerve to not even be interested. So he gives Chief Henry the picture, and Chief Henry is like, he's trying to give him, the information that he needs. He's trying to tell him, who this person actually is. And Zack's like, he's basically like, oh, looking at his watch, like, oh, dude, I don't even care about this. Can we move on? And Zack's like, can you give me the Cliff's Notes version of this lecture that you're giving? And Chief Henry's like, okay, so you're not interested? And Zack's like, well, can you give me a couple of books to read? And Chief Henry just piles them up with books, knowing that Zack didn't crack one of those books. He did not crack any of them. So Zack goes to Mr. Belding next to get Mr. Belding to get Ms. Wentworth to basically back off about this presentation. And Mr. Belding, being a terrible principal once again, how did he get this job? So he's really excited about this track meet, and Zack, the distance runner, whatever. And he's like, you know, I'm the principal here. I'll talk to Ms. Wentworth. I'll flex my principal muscle, which is what he says to his fucking student. I'll flex my principal muscle, and, you know, we'll get through this, Zack. I'll get you out of it. So he calls Ms. Wentworth to the office, and Ms. Wentworth, like a G, is like, when Mr. Belding says, you know, can you give Zack a break? She just turns around and she says, nope. If Zack doesn't do the presentation, he fails and he doesn't get to compete in the track meet. And Mr. Belding is like, oh, Ms. Wentworth, you know, please, you know, we haven't beat Valley in however many years they haven't beat Valley. Nobody cares about it. And he gets embarrassed because Ms. Wentworth tells him Zack had a ton of time to do this shit. And so he's standing there looking like a dumbass because Zack didn't give him all the information that he needed. And he's, you know, he feels stupid now. So now he has to like put his foot down with Zack. He's like, Zack, you better do this project. So Zack goes back to Chief Henry, and he has to, you know, he's like, you know, he doesn't apologize because Zack never apologizes for anything. But he goes back to Chief Henry, and Chief Henry is like, yeah, because we have to make Chief Henry magical. He's like, I knew you'd be back. So he had all this stuff ready to tell Zack about whoever this ancestor is. I forget what he said. He's a chief, of course. And when Zack comes back, Chief Henry calls him Running Zack. That's where the fucking title of the episode comes from. And Zack's like, why'd you call me Running Zack? He's like, well, you're a runner and your name is Zack, so Running Zack. And you're just like your ancestor because he ran too. And I was like, does Chief Henry really have to be magical too? So while Zack is trying to get all this information, he goes like surfing with Chief Henry. Jessie is running around school, running around everywhere, trying to make up for the fact that her ancestors were slave owners. And she's just pestering Lisa. She will not leave Lisa alone. She wants to carry her, and she wants to take her to the mall, and she won't stop. So while Lisa, Jessie, and Slater are at the max, they start talking. I forget what they're talking about, but while they're talking, Slater makes a comment about his ancestor, Slater makes a comment about something, and Jessie is like, bullfighter, and he's like, slave owner, and I'm like, Jessie, how are you even doing that when your people were slave owners? You cannot make jokes on other people when your people were slave owners. I'm sorry, you cannot make jokes about his bullfighting relatives when you come from a line of slave owners. Like, stop it, girl. And I'm like, how are they even joking about this? How is this fun? It's like on the one hand, Jessie is like trying to make up for it in the worst way possible, but she's like in her head, she's trying to do the right thing or a good thing. But I can't. It's so ridiculous. So, Zack Zack goes to school. I don't know how many days later this is, but he goes back to school and he's like he wants to redo his presentation. First, before we get to Zack, we have to be subjected to Screech's ridiculous, like, talking about his Italian relative who was basically like a romantic Casanova type, and he's speaking in this awful Italian, the stereotypical Italian accent. This episode was just offensive to everybody. If you Italian, Native American, Black, it was just basically shit on everybody day. This episode is Saved by the Bell. So Screech is doing that, and he's like harassing girls in class, and Ms. Wentworth is just standing there smiling like, get Ms. Wentworth. See, I was with you earlier and you were doing the right thing, but now you're sitting here for this Screech bullshit because he's trying to throw out lines to girls. He tries to do it to Lisa, and Lisa like clowns him. He does it to another girl, and then the other girl like curves him. And I'm like, why are you letting this boy harass these girls in front of the class and just standing there smiling? Whatever, Ms. Wentworth. I thought you were better than that, but apparently I was wrong. So we get to Zack, and Zack didn't learn shit because my dude walks into class. He's dressed in full Native American, like he's dressed in like just full Native American wear. Like it's something out of like it's like he took a display from a museum and just threw everything on. He has his face painted. He's wearing the giant headdress that people from Coachella would be proud of. He has his face painted. And he's standing up front doing the same pose that Screech was doing earlier. Like, and he gives his presentation, and everybody, and when he comes in dressed like that, Lisa calls it out. She's like, oh shit, no. This is going to be terrible. But Ms. Wentworth is impressed for some reason. And, Zack gets an A on his presentation, of course. And the first thing he wants to do after he gets out of class is to call Chief Henry and tell him, like, hey, dude, I was super offensive, but I got an A anyway. And this isn't funny. He calls Chief Henry's garage, and somebody answers the phone and tells him that Chief Henry died. And Zack is like, really? He's really sad and forlorn, and he goes to, he changes back into his regular clothes because it would be even more offensive to continue to wear that garb after the dude dies. So Zack is supposed to go to like a rally for Valley or whatever, and he doesn't show up, and he's sitting in class mourning with Ms. Wentworth. And I'm like, you just met him. You were super offensive. You've known him for maybe a few hours. Like, you spent maybe a few hours with a dude. And I don't know how long Ms. Wentworth has known him, but Ms. Wentworth could consider him a friend. You're just some student that he met at the end of his life. Like, you're not that important to him, Zack. And he shouldn't be that important to you. I mean, like, really sad. Chief Henry died. Blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry. I have a cold heart. But I don't understand why Zack, like, Ms. Wentworth is crying. Zack is sitting in class with her. Like, they're just sitting quietly together. And Kelly goes to find Zack, and he tells her that he can't compete now. He doesn't want to run, now that Chief Henry's died. And so Zack goes home, And while he's sleeping, he has a dream about Chief Henry. And I'm like, Chief Henry, he's in a white suit. They've got a spotlight shining on him, and he's, in heaven, or he's about to go to heaven to, I don't know, play cards or something like that. Something that he said. I forget what he said. But he's like, Zack is asking him if he's dead too. And this show super into like Christian, like it's like super Christian. Well, not super Christian, but you understand what I'm saying. They lean towards like Christianity, like Christianity's idea of God and heaven and all that, because we had the episode with Screech, who I thought was Jewish. But we had that episode with Screech where he imagines that his mom died when he broke the Elvis statue, and you got Elvis and his mom in their Elvis jumpsuits in heaven. So whatever. I don't care. So Chief Henry, the magical Native American that he is, tells Zack in this dream that, all the answers are in your hands, Zack, or, you know what to do. And when Zack wakes up, he wakes up with the headband that Chief Henry gave him in his hands. I was like, really? We really have to does everything have to be like this? Do you have to go to stereotypes about everything? Like, he has to be the magical Native American. Like, I'm surprised they didn't call him a shaman. So like, whatever. And whatever. So when Zack goes to school the next day, and they're having a pep rally, and nobody is happy because Zack isn't there, because everybody has bought into this whole the distant runner being the big jock in school. And so nobody's excited. And then Zack shows up, and he tells Mr. Belding at the very last minute that he's running, because that's how things work. You can quit a sport one day and then show up a couple days later or a day later, right before a competition, and decide you're going to compete, and there's no consequence at all for what you did. So okay, dude. So Zack is like, I'm going to compete for Chief Henry because I was so close to him in the 4 hours that I actually knew him. And when he when everybody's like getting ready, like happy Zack is there, everybody's walking out ready to compete, and Kelly and Zack stop in the hallway and talk to each other, and she's like, what changed your mind? And he's like, well, Chief Henry told me that all the answers were in my hands. And so he takes out the headband, and the headband on the opposite side of the beating says running Zack. Oh, no, it says beat Valley. Really? Really, Chief Henry? Stop it. Stop it with all of this. I was just... And Kelly and Zack walk off hand in hand, and Zack will live to be offensive and a dickhead another day. Oh my God. This fucking episode. Just everything about it. I couldn't believe it. I should have expected it, because Saved by the Bell has never been, sensitive about anything, but I don't know. They were just throwing around the Indian all the time. They were just throwing it around a whole lot. And Zack only knew Native American stereotypes, like I said before. And I'm like, really? Is that what we're doing here? When did this episode come out? I don't know. Early 90s? Like, we just weren't there yet. I don't know. Or they weren't there yet. Did these old white men that wrote this episode, that write this show and produce this show, like, come the fuck on, people. Like, I did have fun watching that. I did have fun watching the episode, though, because I was just everything was like blowing my mind. Like, Just everything. Oh my goodness. So, next episode, we're almost done this season, y'all. If you are watching along, the next episode is season 3, episode 14, The Babysitters. And oh my God, really? Okay, so this is another one of the episodes that is in the weird Saved by the Bell timeline, because this is another episode where they're all younger. So whatever. There's only there's only 5 more episodes. So after next week's episodes, there are 4 more episodes. 14, 15, 16. No, 5 episodes. I'm sorry. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Yeah, there's 5 more episodes. Next week is The Babysitters. Oh, I remember that episode. That episode is where Kelly has a baby brother because her parents aren't broke enough. They need to keep having children. And she has to bring the baby to school to babysit him. And Zack probably has a bad idea for how to do that. So, if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can follow me personally at the Ms. Introvert, and follow the podcast at TheIntrovertedNerd. That's always fun. I live tweet. I was live tweeting The Walking Dead last night, and that shit show. Oh my God. I hate that show. I won't stop watching it because, and I'm not really hate watching it. I just like watching it live because I like live tweeting it. I don't think I hate watch anything. No, I don't hate watch anything. I mean, or does it count as a hate watch if I hate everybody on that show? Even the people that I used to like, I hate them. So maybe that counts as a hate watch, but I enjoy watching the show live. So join me on Sunday nights when I'm live tweeting The Walking Dead. And on Tuesdays, I live tweet The Flash and Black Lightning. No Flash for the next few weeks. I don't think The Flash comes back until April. Like, what is going on with that show? Why are they taking so many breaks? I mean, I understood the Olympic break, but another break in the season? What is going on there? And I live tweet Black Lightning because you know that I podcast about Black Lightning every week. So if you subscribe to the podcast, you would know that you would get all those episodes, and we can talk about the crazy shit that's happened on that show, because my dude Latavius is back and he is talking to himself, and there are undead people all over the place. It's just, that show is crazy. You should watch it, and you should listen to me podcast about it every Friday. So you can also follow me on Instagram at TheIntrovertedNerd. You'll get like previews of the episodes that I watch every week, and we can talk on there, and it's all a whole lot of fun, and there are videos and all that. You can like the Facebook page, facebook.com/TheIntrovertedNerd. You can send me feedback to TheIntrovertedNerd@gmail.com. And when you subscribe to the podcast, leave me a 5-star review, and I'll read it on the next episode, and everything will be great. So that is it for Saved by the Bell. And until next episode, later, Gators.